This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
All right, so thank you so much for volunteering to be interviewed for ZeroNow. Let's start a little bit about your story in improving campus safety, how you got involved with public safety.
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of history about how I got into the security industry and then kind of talk a bit about the public safety and campus safety side of it. So I've been in the physical security industry for about 21, almost 22 years. And I started out as a technician. So I started on the technical side of it, building systems, mounting cameras, installing access control. And so I had some really great opportunities to work on some big projects. I did the camera solution for years at the Statue of Liberty. So I got exposed at a really early phase in my career into what it meant to do security for like mass groups. And actually during 9/11, the organization that I was with, we were tasked with making sure that the equipment at the Statue of Liberty was still working. And so I had this really great opportunity to be involved in National Park Service and learning, what it meant to secure a campus, right? So whether it's a school campus but the Statue of Liberty, they have 3 different areas within their campuses. And so what did that mean? And, how to make sure that we keep the perimeter safe, statues on an island. So what does that mean? They've got boat traffic and all these other things. So at a really early phase in my career, I got exposed to these kinds of concepts. And throughout my career, and especially, so I've been on the integration side of things for the first 17 years of my career, and then I got into manufacturing. But the last company I worked for in the integration space, we primarily focused on education and law enforcement. And so it was there where I really got a crash course education on the different environment that school campuses is as compared to a corporate environment. And also learned a lot about how there was a tremendous disconnect between law enforcement and the education sector, where, in the event of an active shooter or something like that, oftentimes the police department had been on the campus for the first time, whether it's higher education or K through 12. And that's not when you want to have law enforcement learning your campus. So I started becoming super passionate about connecting, because my customers were law enforcement and education. So connecting law enforcement and education in a controlled environment where I would talk to the campuses and the campus safety people and say, hey, why don't you open up your campus for training for law enforcement so that they get used to where the different buildings are, or where the different, in a K through 12 environment, where the different classrooms are. And so that way, God forbid, there is an incident or an event of any reason, whether it be an active shooter or active assailant, or it could be, somebody's injured. They're going to know where the different classrooms are, and they're going to be used to the layout of the facility. And they loved it. Most of the education facilities were like, oh, this is a great idea. And the law enforcement loved it because it was a free place to train. So that's really where I started getting introduced into the importance of community within campus safety, and that we can't have this us against them mentality where it's like, oh, the police are scary, we don't want the police on our campus because it's going to scare our students. But really introducing law enforcement and campus safety professionals in controlled environments where it's friendly and it's, and you build out a rapport.
So in 2020, you started Credo Cyber Consulting. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what your mission is with that company, and how it is working to advance these ideals of public safety and campus safety?
Absolutely. So physical security was a calling for me. I'm one of the very rare people that came here by design. That's where I got my bachelor's degree in managing security systems. And as I transitioned to different phases of my career, I started realizing probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I started realizing that there was a new element in security that we as security professionals were not doing a great job on, and that was securing endpoint devices. We kind of transitioned into this IoT realm, the Internet of Things realm, and then the physical security products are being put on networks, but we weren't doing a really good job securing those products on a network. So here we are, the security professionals, but we are not providing secure network technology. So I went back to school and got my master's degree in cybersecurity policy and risk analysis as an adult. And I can promise you, Michael, it's way harder to do it in your 40s than it is to do it in your 20s. So if you're going back, go back now. But so I went back to school and I absolutely loved it. And it really kind of poured gasoline on the fire of my passion for security. And I started seeing some things I couldn't unsee. And in particular, cyber hygiene is something that I started becoming super passionate about. And what I realized is that young people are being provided with adult tools, cell phones, iPads, gaming systems, and then obviously laptops and computers. And they're not provided any training as to how to protect themselves in that environment. We wouldn't stick a 10-year-old in a vehicle and say, okay, go drive the car and think it's okay. But we're putting them in a situation where there's a lot of dangers. There are predators out there, and they can also put themselves at risk by putting out too much information about themselves, or maybe putting out something that's risky or inflammatory, and then 5 years later try to get a job, and now that stuff's out on the internet, and now they can't get a job. So how does this all relate to campus safety and public safety? One of the things, a different element that I bring to the table is teaching young people, or what I call digital citizens. So it could be young people, it could be 20s and 30s, it could be 60s and 70s, but teaching digital citizens, anybody who engages online, how to practice proper cyber hygiene, how to protect themselves from predators, how to protect themselves from scams, and also how to share. Like we love to share, everybody loves to share, but like how to share safely, where you have a community of people, maybe in a controlled environment where you lock down accounts, and then you have a public facing account where you just put certain things, right? So I want to make it so that it's still accessible. Being on social media is still accessible, but how to do it safely so that you're not putting yourself at risk. Some of the things like geolocation that are on SnapMap, for example, on Snapchat, people don't realize that when you have a public-facing account that's not locked down and you have SnapMap on and you're taking pictures, people can see where you are. And, if somebody's stalking somebody or a predator or whatever, they know exactly where you are at that exact moment, right? And so just teaching people about how to set up their accounts properly, especially in higher education environment where you've got young people that are out on their own for the first time, in their lives. And they're excited and they want to share and they want to connect and they're meeting all these new people, but you don't know who people are. You haven't been with them for a long time. So really introducing this new element of physical safety combined with proper cyber hygiene.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it sounds like something that not a whole bunch of people in the public safety conversation are talking about. So it's a really unique perspective and I love it. So for some folks who maybe haven't heard of the term cyber hygiene or it's new to them, can you talk about some ways that you are working to integrate this into the lives of schools and students? What does that look like in a practical sense?
Absolutely. I had this really great opportunity just before COVID hit to work with 4th and 5th graders building out a digital learning guide. And I was like, how am I going to translate these things like cyberbullying and digital addiction and all these different, really kind of like adult concepts? How do I introduce it to young people? Well, I have to tell you, these kids were unbelievable. We talked about things like clickbait, and I was describing what clickbait was before I used the term. And in every single session, 4th graders were saying, oh, that's clickbait. And my head spun around like, how did these 4th graders know what clickbait was? But they did. They knew what that was. And we talked about how businesses monetize on your personal and private information and what that means and how to take control over yourself. So some of the concepts when it comes to cyber hygiene are learning the difference between private information, PII, personally identifiable information, and then personal information. So things that aren't necessarily private or unique to you, but your likes and dislikes, because that's how someone creates a profile about you. It's how businesses monetize on us for advertising. People say I'm stuck in an algorithm loop. Well, the reason why you're stuck in the algorithm loop is because they're using cookies and metadata to create millions of data points about you so that they can advertise to you. So I think that if you're not familiar with cyber hygiene, these are the practices of making sure that your social media accounts are set to private. If you'd like to, a lot of kids dream about being an influencer, so they're going to keep their accounts public. Well, you can have a public facing account, like I said before, but make that an account that's specific to the content that you want to deliver to the public, and things that are unique and personal to you. We are a community of oversharers at this point, and we have young people who are being brought up from birth in a community of oversharing. And there's a funny term I just recently found, and I thought it was really cool. It's called sharenting. And it's basically parents who overshare about their kids. And I talk about this a lot when I do presentations to parents, because young people, probably in your age group, have legitimately had a digital footprint from before they're born, because the parents are already showing pictures of them in the womb, sonogram pictures, and then you're born, and now everybody knows your date of birth because your pictures from the day you were born are all over social media. They know where you were born. So all these security questions that account, like your credit card company wants you to fill out, where's your, what's your date of birth, mother's maiden name, place of your elementary school. It's all over the internet. So anybody can take over your identity, because all those security questions are already online. These parents are oversharing for their children, creating digital footprints for their children, and the kids didn't even have a choice, right? And so again, I'm a mom. I have 2 teenage kids. I'm proud of them, and I love to share about them because I'm proud of their things. But at the same time, we have to recognize, like, if you're doing it without their permission, you've created an entire digital persona for your child, and they didn't have any say in it, and now they have to deal with the repercussions. I have a really funny story about myself oversharing. My oldest son, when he was like 10, he loved Einstein. He loved it. It was his idol. He had a big, 18 by 24 picture of Einstein. And for Halloween that year, he went as Einstein. So he had his wig, he had his lab coat, and he had gotten one of those, the Tesla balls that have like energy. He got one of those Tesla balls, and he realized that when he touched the Tesla ball and he touched his Darth Vader digital alarm clock, the alarm clock started going off. So he's like, Mom, check this out. So we did this whole video. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I put it up on YouTube for my in-laws who don't live local. Well, his friends in high school found the video on YouTube 10 years later, 8 years later. And the whole school was like sharing this video about him. And he was devastated because he's like, oh my God, he was so embarrassed. He was 10 years old. He had like a, Mickey Mouse voice at the time. And I was horrified. I felt so bad. Thankfully, it wasn't a severe like bullying thing, but it became a thing. One of the teachers put it up on like the morning announcements, and he was devastated. And so here we are, like, and it's an innocent thing, but I created a really embarrassing situation for my son. I felt horrible. Obviously, I took the video down, forgot that it was even up there, quite frankly. So it's those kind of things that could have turned into a really bad cyberbullying situation where it could have had a really serious effect on my son, and it happens to kids. So my goal when I was doing this 4th and 5th grade, digital learning day, my goal was to really empower young people to learn, the activities that you do online. You should conduct yourself in the same manner as you would if you were face to face. And we become desensitized to a lot of the things that we do online because it's, there's a screen between us and the other people. And I think we have to reintroduce into the education system and into curriculum these different facets of cyber hygiene, whether it be, cyber bullying, whether we're talking about, personal and private information, how misinformation and disinformation campaigns work, and how to do proper research and look for credited sources. Back in the day when I was young, I had to go and look up on the Dewey Decimal System books and magazines and periodicals to have cited sources. Now anybody who's got a blog can put anything they want on the internet. And unfortunately, younger people and older people often will take this stuff as, that this is factual when it could be somebody's opinion. So we really need to do a better job in creating curricula that is current with the times, right? And so unfortunately, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's no longer nation state against nation state when it comes to war. It's nation state against citizens. Citizens are being targeted. They're being targeted for ransomware. They're being targeted with misinformation and disinformation. We've seen it in the last 2 elections. It's rampant. And if we don't teach people how to recognize maybe this doesn't seem right. If it seems a little bit outlandish, maybe we should do some research before we just start spreading it like wildfire. And the only way we can do that is educate people. And I feel that why not start young? Because if we educate young people, then they're going to be better employees when they're working for companies and not going to click on things that are on phishing emails and be a little bit more cognizant of how they conduct themselves online. So to me, it benefits everybody. It benefits us in our personal lives, but also benefits businesses and organizations that they'll have people that they're going to be able to hire that are cognizant of these different things that happen online.
Yeah, I mean, what I really love about everything that you're saying is there are so many different elements that are so interconnected in this conversation around campus security and public safety. You have the social media aspect, you have the law enforcement aspect, we have the cyber hygiene aspect. So how do you understand looking at it from a holistic point of view, taking into consideration all of these different parts that exist under the umbrella of public safety?
Absolutely. So there needs to be, like you said, a holistic approach. You have to have stakeholders from all different parts of the organization. Oftentimes when you go on a college campus, you have the campus safety or campus law enforcement, and everything is very siloed. So their job, they're just so used to being involved in the physical safety part of it. Only now in the last few years are they recognizing the benefits of using tools like social media to do investigations or to get out mass communications. I mean, Twitter is like the new mass communication system, And so having stakeholders from the education side of things, right? And then from the mental health side of things within the campus, and also the law enforcement, they all need to work together to recognize that everybody has to understand the new landscape that they're working within. You've got students that are working remotely, you've got students that are on campus, you've got students that are commuting, and recognizing that there are different needs for different students. And the mental health piece of it is also another one we can spend an hour talking about. But, when COVID happened and you had students that were stuck in dorm rooms and isolated for an entire, 3 months at a time, that does a lot to someone's psyche. And so really looking at it as more of not just physical security, access control and cameras, but looking at it as a big technology landscape and recognizing the mental health as well, the mental health issues.
What is your message to parents who might be watching this interview right now or are a part of ZeroNow who want to be more cognizant about protecting their students, about protecting their children?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, you have to be informed. There are so many platforms that are out there that most parents don't even know that their kids have. And oftentimes people think, well, it's social media. It's a social media platform. It's no big deal. Like, just let them have it. But what you need to understand, there are platforms, and people are going to hate me for saying this, platforms like TikTok that, are owned by nation states, right? And so there are so many things that can happen to your student when they're using a public facing account on a platform, that a nation state is actually backing. Their data could be stolen, they can be influenced. So having conversations with your students, not taking away social media, but having conversations with them, not only about the dangers, but also about what the repercussions are of your digital footprint when you need to go and get a job. I can tell you for a decade now, when in corporate America, when we were hiring new hires, the first thing we would do is look them up on Facebook, look them up on Instagram, look them up on LinkedIn, and see what kind of content that is available publicly for them. So we had a female candidate. This was probably about 10 years ago at one of the companies I worked for. We had a female candidate. Her resume was impeccable. We were going to hire her. We were going to call her for an interview, and we were doing our due diligence, and we looked her up on Facebook, and there were photographs of her completely naked in body paint on a parade. And we're in the security industry. And we were like, you know what? Maybe that's not the type of person that we want working at our organization, especially if this is what's out there publicly available to anybody if they Googled her. So we didn't even call this person for an interview because that to us was not the culture that we wanted within our organization. Not to say that she was a bad person or a good person. It was just the information that was out there about her was not the culture that we wanted to have within our organization. And so educating young people on the content that they're putting out there and what the repercussions are, because even though you think that you're deleting it, it's most likely not being deleted. You know, I know Facebook in their privacy policy, it says they own your content. You're using their platform, they own your content. So even if you delete your account, there's a lot of information that's still out there on you.
So in the beginning of the interview, you talked a little bit about connecting law enforcement and education. You have the background in law enforcement. I'm curious about, in the wake of some of the skepticism, the student skepticism around law enforcement, how that has posed a challenge in building that sense of community and that sense of trust to foster an environment that is conducive to public safety.
That is a phenomenal question, actually, because as a society, we have to get past this distrust and mistrust. And I think it's really important to have student advocates. I think that there has to be dialogue and conversation, because this mistrust and distrust is rooted in things that they've seen, that young people have seen. But I also think it's important to have an open mind to understand that in any profession, there are going to be bad actors and bad apples, right? And we have it in our friend groups, we have them in our families. And so it's not any different in law enforcement. But what we need to recognize is that there are more good guys and women in law enforcement than there are the bad guys and women. And so we have to start dialogue and conversation first. And both sides need to come to the table and recognize and be respectful of each other's point of view. And we can't just make judgment on both sides based on things that have happened in the past with other people. And so, if it happened in a particular law enforcement agency across the country, you can't hold your public safety and public law enforcement people accountable for that. And I think that's really, really important to recognize. So dialogue and having conversation and everyone coming to the table with respect for one another is the only place that we can start.
So we've talked about so many different of these elements that are interconnected and making sure we have that holistic approach. Is there anything that you would say right now you are the most focused on when it comes to campus security?
Educating young people about every campus is different, right? My son goes to school in Fordham. If I asked him today, if God forbid there was an active shooter on his campus, what is it that you're supposed to do? I'm almost going to guarantee that he really doesn't know what the campus policies, procedures are doing. Mm-hmm. In a K through 12 environment, they're required to do active shooter training with the students, but we don't do that in a lot of the college campus facilities. So educating the students on what is the policies and procedures, if there's an active shooter in situation or an active assailant situation, but B, educating them on when I'm on the computer network and something happens on my computer, I accidentally click on something and who do I report that to? Where do I go? So there, again, that holistic security posture, there needs to be communication regarding what the process is in an incident, whatever it is, incident response. And I'm sure that is clearly communicated on most campuses within the faculty and the staff. But are you communicating that to the students, right? Like that's the piece. They're the most important asset on the campus, with all due respect to the adults that are, working there. But the students are the most important asset. So whether it's a cybersecurity incident or a physical security incident or a weather incident, are these young people being taught what incident response plans are for that campus? So I think that's a really good place to start.
Definitely. And, that's why I'm so happy that to be a part of an organization like ZeroNow, because I think getting this message out there is 100% the most important thing. So finally, what is next for you and your company, Credo Cyber, and the work that you are doing with everything that we've talked about today? Where are you planning on going from here?
So I'm in the process of actually writing a book specific to good cyber hygiene and what being a good digital citizen looks like. And it is really a book created to be accessible for young people in K through 12 environment, all the way up to seniors, you know, in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that are engaging online. And the purpose of the book is to kind of demystify the cybersecurity term that everybody's so scared about, and really make it relevant so that you can take actual, like, actionable steps to protect yourself no matter what age group you are. So for me, I want this to be something that's available to specifically to campuses and K through 12 so that they can use it as a teaching tool, and also give me an opportunity to kind of go and speak to campuses about these things, and maybe, you know, set up programs within the campuses to kind of help educate young people. It's been a passion project for me for a while, so I'm really super excited about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Writing a book is such a great process. So that is so exciting. Congratulations. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I just want to thank ZeroNow for all the work that they're doing. It is absolutely an incredible organization, and I'm super proud to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your time in Nashville. And I'll see you soon, maybe at one of the board meetings or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Perfect. You're welcome. Have a good night.